Hi, the other day I recorded my first video on sampling on the OPXY. Having watched that video through, I thought there were a few things in it that I perhaps needed to talk about, so that's the purpose of today's video. So this is going to be all about sampling on the OPXY, with just a few extra hints and tips. Right, the first thing I want to talk about is the default instrument assignments. In my previous video, I kind of inferred that the instrument assignments were locked to specific tracks in a new project. Of course, that's not so. So if I just bring up a new project, press new, watch those lines go across. Now this is a new project. On the left-hand side of the column, I'm showing the engines rather than the categories. And if you want to change that, hold Shift and rotate the dial. But I want engines. So this is going to show me all the engines that I've got on the various tracks. So on track 1 I've got drum, track 2 I've got drum, 3 I've got prism, 4 I've got E-piano, electric piano, 5 dissolve, these are all synth engines. On 6 I've got hard sync, 7 I've got axis, and on 8 I've got the multi-sampler. So those are the assignments when you make a new project. But of course you can always change that. So if I'm on track 8 here and I want a different assignment, I simply scroll the dark grey encoder, and if I want the axis synth, there we are, and then I scroll down with the mid grey encoder to choose a different preset. See? And now that's in. I'm sure you probably got that, but just in case you didn't, I just wanted to make that really clear. Now the nomenclature that I used in my previous video. So when I was talking about the drum sampler, which I did quite a lot in the previous video, I really mean the drum instrument. Something like this, and this is drum engine, drum instrument with the boop preset. Change the preset with any of these encoders, these three, not the dark grey obviously. So I could go to Martini. So when I said drum sampler, I really meant to say drum instrument. Sometimes I talked about a patch, I meant a preset. So if I go to a synth, what have we got here? We've got a prism synth engine, and the preset is shoulder. Very often I say patch, that's kind of an old school word. So when you hear me say patch, if I ever do, I really mean preset. So in previous videos, and probably in future videos as well, if I say the word key, I'm talking about these keys, not the key signature of the project that I'm working on, but the actual key. And I'm sure you've realised that these keys down here, the lower row, these are the kind of naturals. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. And the upper row are the accidentals. F sharp, G sharp, A sharp or B flat, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B flat, C sharp, D sharp. And when I talk about pressing a key, I'm talking about one of these. Okay, one of the 24 keyboard notes. It's 2 octaves. Now when I talk about sampling instruments in my videos, I'm really talking about the 3 instruments which can play back samples. The drum, which is this one here, okay? Let's go to one here, the sampler instrument, and also the multi-sampler, which is another sampling instrument. Okay, you can sample while you're on those instruments, and those instruments can play back those samples, and indeed any sample that you make on this device can be played by one of those 3 instruments: drum, sampler and multi-sampler. Let's talk in a bit more detail about those 3 instruments. So instrument number 1 I want to talk about is called drum. Hold Shift and the track number, there is drum. I've changed it back to the boop kit, which is probably the go-to kit for most people. So here we are, this is the drum instrument. You get a different sample on each key. When you want to sample on this instrument, you choose a key first, press a key first. There it is, it's lit up. I'm on the sampling page now. When you want to sample with this instrument in focus, you press M1, and then that sample will go onto the key you've chosen. And samples on all three of these engines are 20 seconds long maximum. So that is the drum instrument. Number 2 is the sampler instrument. Let's go to this track here. I'm going to change this to a sampler instrument. So I'm going to come down here. They're in alphabetical order, of course, sampler. So now this is an empty sampler instrument. With this instrument, you've got the same sample spread across all the keys. So if I load in a preset, so we'll load in Dream Choir. It's very quiet. Let's try another one. So this is the old school type of sampling where you've got the same sound spread across the keyboard. One sample up and down the keyboard. You'll know if you're on a sampler instrument because it has this very narrow representation of the sample along the top. You can see this is the same as these two waveforms, but a thin one right along the top. When you see that, you don't have to check, you know you're on the sampler instrument. If I go to the drum instrument, you see there's no such thing there. And if I go to multi-sample, along the top of that one you've got the keyboard. But with the sampler instrument you have that narrow representation of the sample along the top, and you know straight away you're on the sampler instrument. Again, 20-second samples with this one. The multi-sampler. So with this instrument, like the drum, you can have a different sample on each key, but this is used specifically to record the sound of up to 24 different notes of an instrument to produce a more accurate representation of that instrument. So you might have a favourite piano or a favourite keyboard or a favourite synth, and you can sample up to 24 notes. So unlike the sampler instrument, which is one note spread along the keyboard, you can have 24 separate samples, and I'm going to be dealing with this in a up and coming video. With this instrument you hold the sample button and you sample by holding M1. Okay, with the sample instrument you sample by pressing the sample button, and with this one you press a key to sample. So let's go over that. With the drum instrument you sample by holding M1. With the sampler instrument you sample by pressing a key first, and with the multi-sampler instrument you sample again by pressing M1. And obviously, you pick your key first. I've gone into a lot of detail about the sampling using the drum and the sampler instruments, and I will be doing it for the multi-sampler probably in my next video. So those are the three instruments that use samples on the OPXY in a bit more detail. One thing I wanted to say, and this is probably a silly thing, when you go to make a sample, whether it's a quick and dirty one, or whether it's on a drum instrument or a sampler or a multi-sampler, let's do this. I'm going to press and hold M1, watch the display. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You see what's happening there? As I'm sampling my voice, we get a countdown in the top, and it's 20 seconds, which is coming up any moment now. And then it's stopped. When it gets to 20 seconds, you get that little disc graphic as it saves, and our sample is now in. So watch out for that countdown. It's an obvious thing, but something you might have missed. I don't know. I probably missed it the first few times I did it. Now, when you make a quick and dirty sample like this, it's not tied in to either the drum or the sampler or the multi-sampler instrument. Once you've recorded the sample, it's up to you which one you choose to play it back. The note you choose in the quick and dirty sample recording process is used to identify the note in the sample library. For instance, OPXYC30. So let's just go to this bass instrument here, press the sampler instrument. I'm going to press the key first, that one there. Going to make a sample. 5, 6, 7, 8. I can play the sample by pressing the play button. 5, 6, 7, 8. And along the top we can see the name of the sample now. I've made my sample and I can play it, I can delete it, but until I bring this sample into either a drum or a sampler or a multi-sampler instrument, I won't be able to use it. On the drum instrument you can assign that sample to any key. So I've pressed this top key here. I'm going to go to Shift and Sample to get to the library. I'm going to scroll to Unnamed, there it is. So it's going to come onto this button here. So if I press this button now, I should hear that sample I just made. 5, 6, 7, 8. And of course all these other keys are unaffected. All the samples assigned to those keys are still there. So although I used a different key, I used C3, it can be assigned to any note in a drum kit. Now if I go to a sampler instrument, this one here, and bring that sample in, again I've got to find it doesn't remember, scroll down to Unnamed, this one here. I'm going to press this C3 here where I sampled the note originally,
5, 6, 7,
and you hear it's an octave too high. 5, 6, 7, 5. Right, it's got a funny loop on it and it's got a load of reverb, but it's the same pitch as the original. Okay, so when you bring that sample that you made in that quick and dirty process into a sampler instrument, you will almost probably have to detune it by an octave. I'm not quite sure why that is. This sampler instrument has got a load of reverb on it because the original instrument had a load of reverb on it. Let's talk about COM and MTP. Now to use this you have to plug in the USB-C cable, so I'll do that now. One thing about plugging anything into the instrument is be careful that you don't scratch the casing as you do so. If you miss, it's very easy to put loads of scratches around here, so always look very carefully, make sure you're plugging it in like that. Now if I press COM, you can see I'm in this screen here, and what I'm going to need is MTP. Now if you're on a Mac, you have to boot up the Field Kit app, which is a free app on the App Store. I didn't say that. You need to boot it up before you try and look at your OPXY files on your computer. So if I press MTP, up comes this window. It's got your serial number at the top, which again I will block out, and here are all your presets. Snapshots are presets that you've made. Here are your projects, the ones I've done so far, again in user, and then finally the samples, and I've got a folder here that says Les OPXY samples, that's me, and the user, those are outside that folder. I'll come back to that folder in a moment. Now if you want to drop your own samples into this folder, your best bet is to make a folder in a separate Finder window, and I'm saying Finder because I'm on the Mac, or whatever the Windows equivalent of that is. Put your own samples in that and then copy that complete folder to the samples folder at root level. Now what I did in my last video, I dragged a whole bunch of samples in, and for some reason, although it looked like they'd gone in, they hadn't, and the folder will appear in the first column of the OPXY's sample library. So here we are, and Les OPXY samples is that folder I spoke of, so this exists on my desktop as well. So if I want to add to this, I'll simply drag my samples in one at a time, or I might make separate folders, but they've got to appear at this level in samples, but you can't make folders inside this. So I've got user here, I couldn't make another folder inside it because the OPXY wouldn't see any samples inside that. And of course you can, let's just close this up a bit. One thing I didn't mention the other day is, of course, you can copy the whole of this to a separate file on your computer. So I've made a folder on my desktop called OPXY, and you simply highlight the whole lot and then just copy it to another folder. So that's a kind of a backup, although it doesn't tell you this in the manual. And don't forget, just to remind you, when you're looking at this particular window on your computer, you are looking at the files on the OPXY, not on your computer. These files only go onto your computer if you physically drag them. I'll show you that folder. So this is the folder on my computer, and here, of course, if I wanted to, I'd be able to, play. So there we are, that's a WAV file, one of my samples in that Saturday song, which I've copied physically to my computer. So if I lost it on the OPXY, I'll be able to get it back using this folder on my computer. I'm sure you get the drift. If you change presets, either on a drum instrument or a synth instrument or another sampling instrument, if you press and hold the relevant track number and M4, you'll be able to save the sound that you've changed, the preset that you've changed. So I've changed this drum kit, haven't I?
F,
because
G,
I've got this
H.
sample here. Right, so I need to be out of the library to do this. If I press and hold 1, you'll see it says save here, which is M4, and if I press that, it would straight away save this. I don't particularly want to do that. You'll see a little disc, spinning disc graphic, and then it will be saved, and then you'll have the option to rename it. Now, I'm pretty sure that when you save a project, the current state of all the instruments is saved with it, but I'm not 100% sure about that, so it's probably not a bad idea to save your presets. I mean, you might get a really good one that you might want to use in a different project, so really good idea to save as you go. Final thing I want to talk about in this video is loop points. Right, so I'm on a drum sampler at the moment. I know it's a drum sampler because there's no narrow sample graphic at the top, there's no keyboard, so it's definitely a drum instrument. Now with drum instruments you don't get loop points. You use the white encoder to change this graphic top right. So I'm going to press this key here, this G sharp key, and it plays this crash sound. Now if I rotate the white encoder all the way back, now this time if I press the key, to hear the sample play all the way through, I need to keep my finger on the key. If I press and come off, it stops. Rotate it one to the right, and I press just once and the whole sample plays through. G is choke group. Okay, I've shown you this before, I'm not going to go all through this. And this is the loop, the sample. So that's the only way you get kind of loops on drum instruments. Now the loop points on the sampler instrument are on the mid-grey and light grey encoders. This is a stereo sample, and you can see we've got mid-grey is the loop start and the light grey is the loop end. You see the dots in the middle. So the sampler instrument has loop points and they are on the mid-grey and the light grey encoders. If I go to a multi-sampler instrument, okay, this too has the same setup. It's got the loop start and loop end on these two encoders. So that explains about the loop points on the sampler, the multi-sampler and the drum instrument. Drum instrument doesn't have loop points, it has playback behaviour with the white encoder, and the sampler and multi-sampler have loop points which you control with the mid-grey and light grey encoders. So quite a lot of mopping up there from yesterday's video. I just felt that maybe a few of those things weren't as clear as they could be. I do have yet another video planned for sampling on the OPXY, and in that video I'm going to talk about the multi-sampler instrument in more detail. I have actually already made a multi-sample of one of my instruments, which I'll show you in that video and how I did it. Also I'm going to be talking about looping on the sampler, bringing loops in and chopping them up. All kinds of fun stuff. It's going to be a really interesting video. Yeah, so two main topics in that next video. But anyway, that's the end of this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and you'll see me in my next one.